The success of the James Bond movies in the early 1960s unleashed a wave of spy-based movies and TV shows, all wanting a piece of the spy pie, which is best enjoyed with a dollop of cream, a supersized brandy and 2 Alka-Seltzers.
What time is it?
This was a popular spy series that revolved around the adventures of an American and a Russian working together.
Open Channel D, please.
The Man from U.N.C.L.E. In the early 60s, just as James Bond films were establishing themselves, American TV producer Norman Felton met with James Bond creator Ian Fleming to kick around ideas for a new spy thriller series. Fleming quickly recused himself from the affair so that it didn't interfere with his deal with the Bond producers, since he was no fool. Before offering Felton his best wishes on the project and embarking on a massive research trip, Fleming did contribute one major thing to the endeavour. He named the protagonist Napoleon Solo, and then sold his interest for a nominal fee.
He got away.
To avoid legal issues with Bond producers, the show would not be named after its hero, and thus, the Man from U.N.C.L.E. was born. But rewinding a bit, Felton had been talking to TV executives in Britain when one asked him why all American series had tall and burly leads. Felton thought the time was ripe for a series led by a man of a smaller stature, but not too small, since The Very Little Man from U.N.C.L.E. wasn't a particularly snappy title. Napoleon Solo would have to be at least 5 foot something. During development, the actual premise of the proposed series was still some way from the eventual series, until writer Sam Rolfe was brought in to flesh out the idea. Rolfe created many of the elements of the series, including defining whatever the hell U.N.C.L.E. actually was. It was now a spy organisation, but not necessarily a purely American one. It would allude to being aligned to the United Nations and its ideals, but wasn't.
Now, your group wants to stop this thrush?
Along with others. I'd say that U.N.C.L.E. is set up for the protection of many people all over the world.
U.N.C.L.E. dealt with many threats to world peace, but the biggest threat was the evil organisation known as Thrush. Though there's no on-screen explanation of the name in that show. I mean, a thrush is a bird. It's also a name for a common yeast infection. So I guess if you need to pick a definition, choose whichever best scratches your itch. To cut a long story short,
too late.
Felton, Arena Productions, and MGM's TV subsidiary, armed with Rolfe's work, interested NBC in financing a pilot, which would have to be completed by January 1964. Even though any resulting series would likely be made in black and white, the pilot would be shot in colour, with the idea that, with a few additional scenes, the pilot could be released as a theatrical feature. NBC, though, made it absolutely clear they didn't want to see a single frame of the pilot in colour. Black and white all the way for them, baby.
My name is Napoleon Solo.
The Man from U.N.C.L.E. starred Robert Vaughn as Napoleon Solo, an American working for U.N.C.L.E, an international organisation not beholden to any one government. He's suave.
Hey, pussycat. Dance with Zelene.
Charming.
Well, we can share this room.
Confident with women.
Just what are you trying to do, Fräulein?
Can mostly hold his own in a fight, but he's not someone that resorts to thuggery to overcome adversaries. His partner, a Russian U.N.C.L.E. agent named Illya Kuryakin,
like my friend Napoleon, I go and I do whatever I am told to,
was serious and learned, slightly alien and aloof despite women fawning all over him. Illya was meant to be Solo's sidekick and barely appeared in early episodes.
I'll attack the guard.
David McCallum became a huge breakout star as a result of his turn in the show, and he was quickly considered the show's co-lead, on the same level as Vaughn.
We do work well together, don't we?
If you want to explain how a character that was barely in the series in early episodes and then became the Illya phenomenon,
there's mischief all around us, and it pays not to forget it.
It's simple. McCallum brought in the ladies.
Yes, he's very attractive.
Oh? You think so?
I mean, when Sally Draper felt stirrings, it was while watching The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Well, why?
Oh, those bangs.
Their boss was Alexander Waverly, played by Leo G. Carroll.
It's from here that I send these young men on their various missions.
He was authoritative, slightly aloof, and happy to break the balls of his underlings.
Yes, it'd be a pity if Mr. Slate had to earn a living as a photographer.
He was a respected leader rather than a beloved one, ready to admonish his staff in his disapproving manner rather than shout and bluster. He's like that uncle who always corrects your grammar, One that, when he shows up at your house uninvited, you pretend you're not home.
You realize that if you move your feet, my head gets cut off?
These guys are friendly with each other, but male bonding was a phrase that hadn't been coined, and TV hadn't gotten to the point where the main characters had to spend every waking moment in each other's company like they would, say, in the 1970s.
We have each other.
They would show concern for each other's welfare and occasionally go against Waverley's orders to abandon the other rather than risk the success of a mission.
I represent an organization known as the U.N.C.L.E.
Man From U.N.C.L.'s other unique selling proposition, at least in the first season, was that often U.N.C.L.E would persuade ordinary members of the public to assist them in their plots against Thrush, usually the guest star of the week, a pair of pest exterminators, a witness to one of Thrush's schemes, or somebody with a really boring life, or even an U.N.C.L.E employee fed up with translating routine messages.
I don't crack under pressure.
Not at all.
Not noticeably, no.
If you really want to overanalyze it, U.N.C.L.E seems to have little moral qualm about putting members of the public into some very dangerous positions. And no paperwork, absolutely no waiver forms, no non-disclosure agreements or organ donor cards.
2 of you? Wow, wait till Mama gets a load of this.
Solo would romance the women, who, if they didn't respond to his charms,
Napoleon doesn't waste any time, does he?
usually flirted with a semi-embarrassed Illya Kuryakin.
She says, what's the difference?
The Man From U.N.C.L.E starts off as a show of the 1960s, but not the 60s with hippies and bright tie-dyed colours, but of early 60s New York society where people dressed for dinner and went to cocktail parties with diplomats and industrialists. It was elegant and sophisticated rather than down and dirty. It's a fairly standard spy series, though one dripping with atmosphere thanks to the black and white photography.
I had figured that out quite a while ago.
It also wasn't a comedy, but a series with a sense of organic, dry humour.
This one is no joker, monsieur.
Basically, a wry comment in the face of adversity. It's generally a dramatic show most of the time, a trait that would disappear as the lighter touch took over. The Man From U.N.C.L.E would be a show that eventually had a very hard time trying to find the right balance between light comedy and serious drama.
So, to our mission.
The Man From U.N.C.L.E pilot focused mainly on Napoleon Solo persuading a housewife to try and rekindle the flame with an old college boyfriend who is now working for Thrush.
I'll protect you in every way possible, but in the end, your safety depends on you.
Solo's boss was originally Mr. Allison, played by Will Kaluva, and replaced in the series as an NBC executive. Couldn't stand that Russian guy whose name he couldn't remember, but it started with something like K, and somehow he got the job and Illya Kuryakin stayed. Parts of the pilot were reshot with Leo G. Carroll as Waverley, and this became the first episode of the show when it was eventually picked up.
I'm an agent for an organization designated as the U.N.C.L.E.
First season of The Man From U.N.C.L.E premiered on NBC in September 1964 with Napoleon Solo and later Illya Kuryakin travelling the world via stock footage, dodgy accents, dodgier makeup and whatever sets and costumes were laying about on the MGM lot.
You have no idea how uncomfortable all this is.
Plots could be imaginative or fairly standard, but it was almost always entertaining, like a dinner party hostess with a drinking problem. The world of U.N.C.L.E and Thrush was slowly built up over time, with U.N.C.L.E agents opening channels D, E, F, G and H all over the shop.
Open channel D.
Gadgetry in the first season was more limited than later on. U.N.C.L.E agents had communicators built into cigarette packets, and they were often armed with their transforming U.N.C.L.E specials. U.N.C.L.E had locations all over the world, but was headquartered in New York. U.N.C.L.E agents would enter the semi-secret facility through Del Floria's tailor shop. We say semi-secret, it's supposed to be purely secret, though literally in the first scene of the pilot, enemy agents infiltrate U.N.C.L.E HQ.
My cablegrams stress the dangers to us all.
Then who are these 2 men?
Plots would be reasonably well-developed spy stories, still mostly set in the US during the first season, with occasional visits to overseas locales, all of it mainly filmed on the MGM lot. Man From U.N.C.L.E was not necessarily realistic, but there was a verisimilitude to the proceedings. Plots occasionally got a little far out, like a scientist trying to reanimate a corpse that was probably meant to be Hitler, but it was played straight and fit with the world of the show. You weren't suddenly going to have, I don't know, characters riding a bomb filled with skunk essence. Not yet anyway. Man From U.N.C.L.E wasn't an immediate success and was in danger of cancellation when the PR people attached to the show devised a bold strategy of touring Vaughn and McCallum around the country to make personal appearances at things like parades, local festivals and fairs. The scheduling of these appearances was brutal. The actors would get on a plane immediately after completing a week's filming, wave at crowds at the wherever state fair on the weekend, and be back at work ready to shoot the next episode. The strategy worked and ratings steadily increased through the end of the first season, leading to a renewal. As the show used Illya more and more, capitalising on McCallum's increasing profile, the workload could be spread more evenly between the two stars. Unusually for such a situation, the show's first billed star didn't seem to mind too much. While he was filming The Man From U.N.C.L.E, Robert Vaughn was studying for his PhD, just in case his whole acting thing didn't work out for him. When the show began production on its second series, changes were made. Sam Rolfe left the series and producer David Victor would oversee the show. Popularity brought with it an expectation to maintain the newfound audience and build on it. Like a tech billionaire needing to become a tech 2 billionaire by monetizing your kids' photos.
It was then that my father came to your people. It was then that my father and the great Prince Faisal did bring together all the hitherto divergent tribes in the desert.
The plots would be lighter, like a helium balloon piloted by Dean Martin, and the guest stars bigger. The co-opting of ordinary people would morph into larger-than-life characters played by well-known guest stars becoming involved in either Thrush's plots or Uncle's attempts to stop them. The guest stars' acting could often be best described as broad, like the wingspan of a 747, and just as off-putting if you found one in your kitchen.
She called me Gary. It's Jerry!
Colour brought with it the challenge of making things bright, but also trying to not look cheap. U.N.C.L.E plots would often split up Illya and Napoleon for most of the episode, and more often they'd walk into a trap somewhere in Act 2 and have to escape from some deadly predicament before defeating this week's foe, and then they would meet up again at the episode's conclusion with a coin toss over who walked away with this week's guest artist and who got the bottle of scotch.
Open Channel D.
From the second season onwards, gadgets played a larger role. U.N.C.L.E communicators were now embedded in these snazzy pens, and there were many one-off gadgets that just happened to be carried by Solo and Kuryakin. For two organisations like Thrush and U.N.C.L.E, each claiming to have state-of-the-art technology, it's interesting to see how almost everybody seems very happy to stick with firearms dating back to World War II or earlier.
Thrush, what is this, little bird? A beep beep?
No. It's an omnivorous vulture that's going to gobble up the brain of your nephew here.
The show was rating really well in its second season, hitting a peak of popularity. So why not look at a spin-off of U.N.C.L.E? The original idea was to make a Lady from U.N.C.L.E show, possibly just as a half-hour show, but this was eventually piloted during the Man from U.N.C.L.'s second season episode, The Moonglow Affair, with Mary Ann Moberly playing April Dancer, a green U.N.C.L.E agent paired with a cynical 40-something agent Mark Slate.
A woman would be the last thing they would expect.
In the episode, Solo and Kuryakin are on ice while the two mismatched agents try to work together.
I was thinking of teaming the two of you again.
By the show's third season, beginning in late 1966, television had changed. In January of that year, Batman debuted and had become an immediate pop culture sensation with its comedic sensibility and high camp feel. This led to more than a few shows latching onto Batman's comedy leanings in order to try and leech some of that show's appeal by some form of osmosis. Lost in Space, for example, became sillier to compete, and to a lesser extent, so did The Man From U.N.C.L.E. Plots got sillier, guest artists became bigger, and their acting no longer constrained by things like, good taste. In many episodes of the third season, Illya and Napoleon seem almost like supporting players, reacting to the overbearing characters played by the guest artists. Remember the time you invited Dave from work to your birthday party and he insisted on being the centre of attention?
I get my check on the 20th.
Also, Dave, if you're watching this, you still owe me $200 for the coffee table you broke when you insisted on demonstrating your surfing moves.
Humor is the gadfly on the corpse of tragedy.
Pushkin.
My grandmother.
It was still a fun time, but the jeopardy would often be undercut by, I don't know, let's say the sight of Illya Kuryakin riding a bomb filled with skunk essence that's about to hit Las Vegas.
The one we just dropped contains 10 tons of dimethylchlorofluoride. Essence of skunk.
The show often felt like an expanded episode of Get Smart. Some of it was fun, some of it was, let's just say indescribable and move on.
Strings turn tightly to tune the tension that pulls him apart.
The Man From U.N.C.L.E would lean on comedy more and more, like a conference speaker who got an early laugh making a pun about oranges and then couldn't stop himself dropping various mentions of cherries, bananas, apples, pineapples, peaches and kiwi fruit into his talk about the debilitating effects of diabetes on juveniles.
Why do you carry 2 guns?
One of them is a novelty item, a toy. I believe it's the other one.
U.N.C.L.'s original inspiration, the James Bond films, had become more and more way out, with the third entry, Goldfinger, providing a template that many producers would try to emulate in rival films, each trying to out-Bond each other.
Do you like spy movies, Mr. Solo?
Well, I tell you, they're all right if you like light entertainment. I just think they're pretty far-fetched.
The spy mania of the mid-60s also took over television. When it began, The Man From U.N.C.L.E was one of only a few spy-themed series, but by the 3rd season, U.N.C.L.E was up against a wave of TV spies. I Spy, Get Smart, Mission Impossible, Wild Wild West, and not to mention an increasing number of British imports. The Man From U.N.C.L.E would also have competition from his own spin-off. The Girl From U.N.C.L.E became a full series in its own right, running alongside the 3rd season episodes of The Man From U.N.C.L.E in the 1966-67 season. The Girl From U.N.C.L.E was almost just more Man From U.N.C.L.E, using the same style of title sequence, now amended to show a female agent. You know this because she has a handbag, and by its own version of Jerry Goldsmith's U.N.C.L.E theme tune. Leo G. Carroll pulled double duty by appearing as Alexander Waverly in both series. While not appearing in the pilot episode, the original choice for April Dancer was offered the starring role for the series.
My name is April Dancer.
Stefanie Powers is rather good in the role, not playing the usual glamour-puss breathy starlet type that most of the guest actresses on Man From U.N.C.L.E had tended to be. April Dancer wasn't big on action and she didn't use guns very often, so most missions had her infiltrate some group or organisation, and if they could get her into a clingy outfit, leotard or bikini while doing so, more's the better.
If you won't fight him, I will.
All right, watch out for low punches.
Her offsider, Mark Slate, was no longer a much older agent, but now much closer to April's age and also now English.
Ah, there you are. I thought you'd switched to an unlisted number.
Mr. Slate?
Sorry, sir. I was trying to locate Miss Dancer, sir.
Mark Slate seemed a much more chill version of Illya Kuryakin, and he would handle the vast majority of the action scenes in the series, often wearing this stupid hat. That hat was his thing, I guess.
I know we don't look it, but we're U.N.C.L.E agents.
You better believe us.
Mark and April aren't too flirty with each other. They're more of a brother and sister act. Neither is shy about pointing out the other's flaws. They're exactly like brothers and sisters.
Now leave me alone.
The Girl From U.N.C.L.E is exactly like The Man From U.N.C.L.E in its broad comedy laugh-in phase.
Oi, 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 oi! My Bulgarian baby!
Girl From U.N.C.L.E is a fairly frivolous show, full of humour and over-the-top guest artists. Yes, Boris Karloff is unironically playing a woman. The episodes don't generally feature plots of world-shattering importance. They're more the, we better prevent Thrush from getting their hands on this Formula X that, if they got their hands on it, could conceivably possibly mean world domination or, I don't know, destruction of the planet, sometime maybe perhaps in the potentiality of the future.
Oh, really, Sarita, couldn't we be a little civilized?
The silly phase of these series was entertaining, but wore out its welcome faster than someone trying to sell you an extended warranty on a loaf of bread. Ratings for both series dropped off by the end of that year. Girl From U.N.C.L.E was cancelled after one season of 29 episodes.
Goodbye, April.
Let's be honest, we all know why. It was the hat. Model company AMT offered to build a full-size custom car for the series, one that AMT could then sell as a model kit. The futuristic U.N.C.L.E car, also known as the Pirahna, doesn't appear in many episodes, which may explain why it's not as well remembered as Illya Kuryakin riding a bomb filled with skunk essence. The Pirahna appeared in some 3rd and 4th season episodes. Its sleek styling looked great, but apparently was reasonably impractical in use. And then there were the movies. During the first season of Man From U.N.C.L.E, MGM began repurposing episodes as features and released a few of them in cinemas in North America and Europe.
That was a right fine movie.
These re-edited episodes did quite well in increasing the show's profile. I mean, they weren't Hollywood blockbusters, but the sorts of things you'd see on a double bill with, I don't know, an Elvis movie in a smaller theatre or a drive-in. The Elvis movies to get your date excited, the Uncle movie to enjoy while you sat alone in the car with an ice pack in your lap. In Europe in particular, where the show hadn't necessarily begun screening on television, these were very popular and profitable, so MGM would eventually roll out 8 Man From U.N.C.L.E features. It's likely there are people whose main exposure to the original Man From U.N.C.L E series is from these films. The first few films were standard 1-hour episodes expanded with new footage that would be used in other episodes.
You promised not to attack me.
How can I attack you when you're pointing that thing at me?
Plus some additional footage that would be a little more violent or sexier than would normally be acceptable to NBC censors. Later films would generally be 2-part episodes edited together with more risque material, but by the last of the movies, they were just TV episodes with new title sequences.
5 kidnapped scientists and a plan to melt the polar ice cap.
Good, I think I'll take the afternoon off.
U.N.C.L.E was an early series to go handheld, using lighter, smaller film cameras, which really helped speed up production of action scenes. It also had some of the 60s best TV composers working on the show. Jerry Goldsmith had scored the pilot and a few early episodes and set the scene for the series with a Marshall-sounding theme tune that was updated each season, first by jazz legend Lalo Schifrin. Of course, as the show became more slapstick, the score followed. You knew the show was in trouble once the composer had to bust out the kazoos. Generally, for both the music and the show, the best description is, it's like jazz, man, totally cool. Though a few times when an episode tried to look at youth culture of the day and rock music, it always came off like Grandad showing you his latest dubstep remix at Christmas.
Hey everybody! The wheat germ's ready!
Despite a ratings drop-off after the silliness of the 3rd season and the cancellation of sister show Girl From U.N.C.L.E, Man From U.N.C.L E, however, was given another chance for the 1967-68 season.
I favor the moderately conservative left, slightly to the right of Rasputin.
The Man From U.N.C.L.'s 4th season would attempt to wind back the comedic excesses that took hold during the 2nd season and spiraled out of control during the 3rd year.
I trust everything is well. Have you been able to ascertain yet what Mr. Kuryakin is up to?
No, sir, we don't know what his plan of operation is yet.
Its 4th season would be make or break, like trying to walk directly after a skiing accident.
Missile Defense Unit.
The 4th season would be played deathly serious. Gone were the large performances from the guest artists, out went the constant quips, and in came harder-edged spy antics. And it was completely lacking in any charm, like Auntie Beryl running off with the groom at your niece's wedding. The body count also seems a lot higher, and I have to be honest, some of these episodes were an absolute slog to get through. Ratings weren't enough to keep the show going, and The Man From U.N.C.L E was cancelled mid-season in early 1968.
I should have known who it was when I saw you trip over your own feet.
McCallum and Vaughn both seemed to be very good sports about the sorts of things that Illya and Napoleon would get up to.
Just when you think all the world's pink.
They always seemed game.
Excellent. You getting this, Kuryakin?
Yes, it's all going in up here.
Good.
According to Noel Harrison, McCallum once suggested to him that Girl From U.N.C.L.E crew really should take the job more seriously. Well, that's dedication. The Man From U.N.C.L.E would see a parade of guest actors appearing in the show. Lots of faces familiar to viewers of 1960s television. Even if you don't know the names, you know the face. It's that guy from That Thing, or that girl who was in that one episode of that show, usually Star Trek. Every starlet or character actor you could name probably appeared in The Man From U.N.C.L.E. It was that sort of show. As the show became more popular, bigger names clamoured to appear. By the early 80s, television producers began falling over themselves, trying to revive TV series from the 60s.
Why?
A large number of reunion movies serving as pilots to continue old series were made, often called the return of something. And so in 1983, producer Michael Sloan put together an Uncle reunion.
Your bet, Mr.
Solo. Napoleon Solo.
The return of the Man from U.N.C.L.E, the 15 years later affair, saw Napoleon Solo and Illya Kuryakin as ex-Uncle agents brought back into service when Thrush rears its itchy head again. It's a fun if fluffy reunion that perhaps squanders the opportunity to see the favourite characters together again by keeping Solo and Kuryakin apart for most of the story.
I carried an explosive charge in my watch.
Where do you carry it now?
In my shoe.
It also didn't have a problem with being tongue-in-cheek by having Avengers star Patrick Macnee as the new head of U.N.C.L.E, or George Lazenby popping up in an Aston Martin playing a character called JB.
Is Mr. Kuryakin with you?
Yes?
I was wondering, are the two of you doing anything for the next few days?
Ratings weren't enough to justify a new series. And then nothing. After U.N.C.L.E, both McCallum and Vaughn kept busy in the acting world, avoiding the fate of many stars of 60s television, being typecast in a role because people couldn't see you playing anything else. Vaughn appeared in many movies, both big and small, often playing all sorts of ruthless types, as well as guest starring roles on television and appearing as a regular on a few series. McCallum appeared in a massive number of TV guest roles, as well as headlining a few shows, and occasionally the streams would cross. Noel Harrison, son of actor Rex Harrison, had a hit single with Windmills of Your Mind from the original version of the Thomas Crown Affair. And Stefanie Powers would later headline the popular 80s mystery series Heart to Heart. Finally, in 2015, director Guy Ritchie's cinematic reboot of The Man from U.N.C.L.E showed up in cinemas. It was a 60s period piece recounting how Napoleon Solo and Illya Kuryakin first met. While it's a fun and stylish movie, it doesn't feel remotely like The Man from U.N.C.L.E, with two men of slight build being exchanged for a very well-built man who normally played Superman and a guy who thinks cannibal talk is a sexy pickup line. It wasn't a big success, leading it to be a one-and-done film, though I personally wouldn't have minded seeing more. To me, its cardinal sin is almost completely nixing Jerry Goldsmith's theme tune. It is in the film. Just.
And I'm sure the sequel will be even better.
Sequel?
Man from U.N.C.L.E was one of those 60s classic TV shows that burned very brightly for a very brief time.
I did not know the cake was loaded.
But it's also a show that's fondly remembered by people who've seen the episodes or the compilation movies. It's a show that started off as a standard spy series.
Well, that takes care of any unanswered questions.
Found a sense of humour.
You just call me a nappy.
Nappy.
Doubled down on slapstick and goofy characters.
We're still friends, aren't we?
Of course.
Before swinging to the opposite extreme, a harder-edged serious spy drama. While every season might not appeal to everyone, there's probably a phase of the show that does speak to you.
Don't call us.
We'll call you.
The Man from U.N.C.L.E is still a fun, stylish series that oozes charm. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below or check out some of our other videos.
You've had cholera, dysentery, yellow fever, elephantiasis, dengue, and malaria, jungle rot, tsetse fly, and athlete's foot.